Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan, Corner Brew Cafe, 7:30 a.m. Sophie Carter was having the worst day of her life, and it wasn't even 8-inch the morning yet. First, the subway broke down at 42nd Street. Then, every taxi was occupied during rush hour. Now, running to make the meeting that could save her small digital marketing agency from bankruptcy, she crashed into the most infuriating man in the universe. "Sorry," she started, trying to balance her briefcase, phone, and the coffees she'd bought to impress potential clients. "You shouldn't be running in a public space," the man said, adjusting his Armani tie with an air of superiority that made Sophie want to shove his head in a trash can. "You could have hurt me." Sophie stared at him. Impeccable suit, Rolex that probably cost more than her 6-month rent, and that expression of someone who'd never worked a day in his life. "Hurt you? I barely touched you, Prince Charming." "Prince Charming?" He arched a perfectly groomed eyebrow. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "Someone who clearly needs a reality check." The man gave her a condescending smile that made Sophie's blood boil. "Look, sweetheart, I understand you're nervous being in the presence of smack." The slap echoed through the entire cafe. Customers stopped sipping their lattes. The barista dropped a croissant. Sophie had just slapped a complete stranger across the face. "Nobody calls me sweetheart, you arrogant jerk." The man touched his face, more shocked than hurt. For the first time in his life, Nathan Sterling, heir to a luxury resort empire, man who graced Forbes covers annually, was completely speechless, and then something happened that had never happened before. He laughed a genuine laugh, not the polite chuckle he used at Park Avenue business dinners. "You," he said, still holding his face, "you actually slapped me, and I'd do it again if necessary." Sophie shot back, adjusting her bag on her shoulder, with impressive dignity for someone who'd just committed assault in public. Nathan watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor with determination, wavy hair bouncing, posture straight despite the obvious chaos of her morning. It had been years since anyone treated him like a normal human being, decades since anyone challenged him, and no woman had ever been so real with him. "Excuse me," he called out, catching up to her at the door. "I deserve that. Let me buy your coffee." Sophie turned around, her brown eyes still sparking with anger. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity. It's an apology." She studied him for a long moment. Something was different in his expression now, less arrogance, more curiosity. "Your face is red," she said, and for the first time showed something that might be a smile. "You have a strong hand. Kickboxing classes for dealing with men like you," she replied. Nathan laughed again. "Sophie Carter," she finally said, shortening her hand. "And you are?" "Nathan," he replied, shaking her hand and feeling an electric current run up his arm. "Nathan Sterling." Sophie's smile disappeared instantly. Sterling, like the resorts, exactly like the resorts. And that's when Sophie realized she had slapped the richest and probably most powerful man in New York. "Shoot," she muttered. "Language, sweetheart," Nathan said with a mischievous smile. Sophie raised her hand again, threatening another slap, and he backed away, laughing. Neither of them imagined that moment would change their lives forever. Sterling Enterprises Tower, same day, 0 p.m. Sophie sat in the marble and gold lobby of Sterling Enterprises, feeling like Alice, who'd tumbled down the wrong rabbit hole. The morning's coffee shop incident played on repeat in her mind. She'd slapped Nathan Sterling. Nathan Sterling. The man owned half of Manhattan's luxury hospitality industry. Her phone buzzed with another text from her business partner. "Please tell me you didn't actually assault our potential investor." Lila had always been the voice of reason between them. Miss Carter, a woman in an impossibly crisp Chanel suit, approached. "Mr. Sterling will see you now." The elevator ride to the 52nd floor felt like ascending to Mount Olympus. Sophie caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Her wavy hair had given up any pretense of professionalism hours ago, and there was a coffee stain on her blazer that she'd tried to hide with a strategically placed scarf. She looked like what she was, a small business owner, barely keeping her head above water in the most expensive city in America. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened to reveal a corner office that could house her entire Brooklyn apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Manhattan stretching endlessly below. Nathan stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, looking every inch the corporate prince. "You came," he said without turning around. "Did I have a choice?" Your assistant was very persuasive. He turned then, and Sophie was struck again by how unfairly handsome he was. The red mark from her slap had faded, but she could swear she saw amusement dancing in his green eyes. Please, sit. He gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly revenue. I'm not here to grovel, if that's what you're expecting. Good. I hate groveling. Coffee? I've had enough coffee drama for one day. Thanks. Sophie remained standing, arms crossed. What do you want, Nathan? He smiled at her use of his first name, no Mr. Sterling, no deference, just his name, like he was a regular person. I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. I need a girlfriend. Sophie blinked. Come again? Not a real girlfriend. A fake one. For appearances. Nathan walked to his desk, picked up a tablet, and showed her a business magazine cover. His photo dominated the page with the headline, Manhattan's Most Eligible Bachelor. Why won't he commit? My board of directors thinks I'm irresponsible. A playboy who can't be trusted with the family legacy. They want me to prove I'm mature enough to take over as CEO when my father retires next year. So, get a real girlfriend. I don't have time for real relationships. They're complicated. Sophie laughed, a sharp sound. And fake ones aren't? We'd have clear boundaries, a contract, you attend a few events with me, meet my family, convince everyone I'm capable of commitment. In return, he slid a paper across the desk. Sophie's eyes widened at the figure. This is enough to save your agency, pay your employees for a year, and give you the financial freedom to expand into the luxury market. She looked up at him. Why me? You could hire any model, any socialite, because you slapped me. That's your criteria for fake dating? Physical violence? You treated me like a normal person. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Nathan's voice carried a note of something she couldn't identify. Loneliness. Maybe everyone else either wants something from me or is intimidated by my family name. You just saw an arrogant guy who needed to be put in his place. Sophie stared at him for a long moment. You're serious? Dead serious. What would this entail? Exactly. A few dinner dates where we'll conveniently be photographed, the Metropolitan Museum Gala next weekend, meeting my family at our Hamptons house for Sunday brunch, maybe 3 months total, and you think people will believe we're together? We're from completely different worlds. Opposites attract. Besides, the best performances are built on truth. And the truth is, you intrigue me. Something in his tone made her heart skip. Nathan, look, I know it sounds crazy, but you need the money. And I need to convince my board I'm not the irresponsible heir they think I am. It's a business arrangement that benefits us both. Sophie walked to the window, looking down at the city sprawling below. From up here, her problems seemed microscopic, her struggling agency, her overdue rent, her employees who counted on her to keep their health insurance active. What happens when it ends? She asked quietly. We break up amicably. You keep the money. I get control of my company. Everyone wins. She turned back to him. And if we get caught in the lie, we won't. How can you be so confident? Nathan smiled, and for a moment, she glimpsed the man behind the corporate facade. Because you're the most authentic person I've met in years. If anyone can make this convincing, it's you. Sophie picked up the contract, scanning the terms. It was generous, almost too generous. There had to be a catch. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? Because you probably are. His grin was absolutely wicked. So, Sophie Carter, will you be my fake girlfriend? She looked at him, really looked. Behind the confidence and designer suits, she saw the weight of family expectations, the loneliness of never knowing if people liked him for who he was or what he could give them, and maybe, just maybe, she saw someone who needed saving as much as she did. I have conditions. Name them. No touching without permission. No surprises that could embarrass me publicly. And if you ever call me sweetheart again in that condescending tone, I'll do more than slap you. Nathan laughed, extending his hand. Deal. As their hands met, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling she'd just stepped onto a roller coaster. She just hoped she could hold on for the ride. There's one more thing, Nathan said, his hand still holding hers. We start tonight. There's a charity dinner at the plaza. Black tie. Sophie's stomach dropped. Tonight, Nathan? I don't have anything to wear to a plaza charity dinner. Already handled. He pressed a business card into her palm. Bergdorf's personal shopping department. They're expecting you at 4. Everything's taken care of. You were that sure I'd say yes? I was that hopeful you would. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For just a moment, the billionaire facade slipped, and she saw the man underneath, vulnerable, hopeful, maybe even a little scared. "Don't make me regret this, Sterling. I'll do my best, Carter." As Sophie left his office, contract signed and mind spinning, she wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. Behind her, Nathan watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she emerged onto the street, 52 floors below, a small figure navigating the Manhattan crowds. For the first time in months, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Anticipation. Tonight, the performance would begin. The Plaza Hotel, same evening, 7 o'clock p.m. Sophie stood outside the Plaza Hotel, questioning every life choice that had led her to this moment. The midnight blue Valentino gown that Nathan's personal shopper had selected fit like it was made for her, but she felt like an actress wearing a costume for a role she didn't understand. The dress probably cost more than her rent. The shoes definitely did. Deep breaths, she murmured to herself, watching black cars drop off Manhattan's elite. It's just dinner with photographers and New York's most powerful people watching your every move. No pressure at all. You look absolutely stunning. She turned to find Nathan approaching, and her breath caught. He looked devastatingly handsome in a classic black tuxedo, but it was his smile that made her heart skip warm and genuine. Nothing like the polished charm she'd expected. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she said, accepting his offered arm and trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at his touch. "Shall we give them a juju show?" The hotel's entrance was lined with photographers, just as Nathan had predicted. Sophie felt herself tense, but his hand covered hers reassuringly. "Just be yourself," he whispered close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "That's all I need." The camera flashes began, the moment they stepped out of the black town car. Sophie forced herself to smile, but it felt awkward and artificial, until Nathan leaned down and said quietly, "You have something in your hair." "I do not," she protested automatically, reaching up self-consciously. "Made you smile naturally," he said with a boyish grin, gently pretending to remove something. "Perfect." The cameras captured the moment, her genuine laughter, his tender gesture, the way they looked at each other like no one else existed. It looked exactly like two people falling in love. Inside, the ballroom was a symphony of crystal chandeliers, white orchids, and the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Sophie recognized several faces from business magazines and society pages. These people moved in circles so far above hers they might as well have been from another planet. "Mr. Sterling," a woman in enough diamonds to fund a small country glided over, "you simply must introduce me to your enchanting companion. Eleanor Whitmore, meet Sophie Carter," Nathan said. "Sophie, Eleanor chairs the Children's Hospital Board." Sophie extended her hand graciously. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Whitmore. The work you do for children's health care is incredible." Eleanor's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "You're familiar with our organization?" "My little sister was treated at Children's Hospital when she was 7. The staff there saved her life," Sophie said, her voice warm with genuine gratitude. "I've been donating what I can ever since." Something shifted in Eleanor's expression, surprise, giving way to genuine interest. "How refreshing to meet someone who understands our mission personally. What do you do, dear?" "I run a digital marketing agency. We specialize in helping small businesses compete with larger corporations." "How fascinating. You must tell me more about it." As Eleanor engaged Sophie in animated conversation about her business, Nathan watched with growing admiration. Sophie wasn't trying to impress anyone or name-drop her way into acceptance. She was simply being herself, passionate, intelligent, genuine. "Your girlfriend is lovely," Eleanor said quietly to Nathan when Sophie stepped away to check her phone. "She's nothing like your usual type." "What's my usual type?" "Beautiful but vapid, wealthy but entitled. Sophie is." Eleanor paused, choosing her words carefully. "Substantial. Don't lose this one, Nathan." Before he could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A stunning redhead in a dress that belonged more on a red carpet than at a charity dinner swept into the ballroom, followed by her usual entourage of socialites and photographers. Nathan's entire demeanor changed, his jaw tightened, and Sophie felt him withdraw even though he hadn't moved an inch. "Ex-girlfriend?" she guessed, returning to his side. "Worse. Ex-fiancé. The redhead, Vivian Langston." Sophie remembered from the gossip columns, spotted them across the room and made a beeline for their table. Her smile was perfectly practiced and completely predatory. "Nathan, what a delicious surprise." Her eyes swept over Sophie with the precision of a jewelry appraiser evaluating a questionable diamond. "And who is this charming creature?" "Vivian." Nathan's voice was carefully neutral, Meet Sophie Carter. Vivian. Sophie. Carter. Vivian tapped her perfectly manicured finger against her glossy lips. I'm sorry. I don't recognize the family name. Are you in real estate? Fashion? Your people must be in something significant for Nathan to be seen with you at an event of this caliber. The insult was delivered with such sweetly venomous precision that Sophie almost admired the artistry of it. Almost. Actually, Sophie said with her brightest smile, I'm nobody particularly important, just a middle-class girl from Brooklyn who runs a small business and drives a Honda that's older than some of the wine being served tonight. Nathan finds my complete lack of social pedigree refreshing, apparently. Vivian's smile faltered. She clearly hadn't expected Sophie to own her ordinariness so boldly and without shame. How quaint. Vivian's voice dripped with condescension. Nathan always did enjoy his little experiments. Is that what you were? Sophie asked with innocent curiosity. An experiment? Nathan nearly choked on his champagne. Vivian's face went through several interesting shades of pink. Well, she said tightly, her composure cracking just slightly, enjoy your little adventure, Nathan. We all know how these fascinating diversions typically end. After she glided away with her entourage in tow, Nathan stared at Sophie with something approaching awe. Did you just completely dismantle my ex-fiancée with honesty and self-deprecating humor? Yeah. I think I did. Sophie took a sip of her champagne, rather pleased with herself. That was completely inappropriate for high society. I know. I warned you. I'm not good at this whole elite social thing. It was magnificent. Nathan's smile was brilliant and genuine. I don't think anyone has ever stood up to Vivian like that. She's used to intimidating people with her family name and social connections. Why did you get engaged to her in the first place? Nathan's smile faded slightly. Because it made perfect sense on paper. Our families have known each other for generations. Our business interests aligned beautifully. Our social circles overlapped completely. We were what everyone called the ideal power couple. And in reality? In reality, I felt like I was slowly suffocating. He met her eyes. She never would have slapped me in a coffee shop. Most rational people wouldn't slap strangers in coffee shops. Maybe, but you saw right through all the superficial nonsense and called me out for being a pompous jerk. When was the last time someone did that to me? He paused, considering. Actually, when was the first time someone did that to me? Sophie studied his face in the soft ballroom lighting. It must be lonely. Having everyone treat you like you're untouchable. You have no idea. The orchestra began playing, and couples moved toward the dance floor. Nathan stood and offered his hand. Care to dance, Miss Carter? I should probably warn you. I learned to dance at my cousin's quinceañera. Not cotillion. Even better. As they moved onto the dance floor, Sophie was surprised by how naturally she fit into Nathan's arms. He was an excellent dancer, leading her through the waltz with easy confidence. You're full of surprises, she said as he spun her gracefully. So are you? Eleanor Whitmore doesn't give her approval lightly. She genuinely likes you. She's easier to talk to than your ex-fiancé. Most people are. Nathan's hand tightened slightly on her waist. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Your sister, the one who was treated at Children's Hospital, is she okay now? Sophie's expression softened. She's perfect. Studying pre-med at Columbia, actually wants to be a pediatric surgeon because of her experience there. She says someone saved her life when she was 7, so now she wants to spend her life returning the favor. Nathan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was unusually thoughtful. That's beautiful. She's pretty amazing. Sophie looked up at him. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand what makes you tick. You're not like anyone I've ever met. Is that good or bad? It's terrifying, he said honestly, and completely fascinating. The song ended. But they remained in each other's arms for a moment longer than necessary. Around them, the charity dinner continued. Speeches were made, donations were pledged, and New York's elite patted themselves on the back for their generosity. But Sophie was only aware of Nathan's green eyes looking down at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. We should probably, she began. Probably, he agreed, but neither of them moved. Nathan, Sophie, a photographer appeared beside them. Mind if I get a shot for the Times Society page? They posed, Nathan's arm around Sophie's waist, her hand resting on his chest. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple completely smitten with each other. The terrifying part was how easy it felt to pretend. As they smiled for the camera, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere between the coffee shop slap and this moment, The lines between performance and reality had started to blur, and judging by the way Nathan was looking at her, she wasn't the only one feeling it. Sterling Estate, East Hampton. 2 weeks later, Sophie stared at the Sterling family estate through the passenger window of Nathan's Aston Martin and wondered if she'd somehow driven into a movie set. The sprawling mansion looked like something from The Great Gatsby, all white columns, manicured lawns, and the kind of old-money elegance that whispered power across generations. "You grew up here?" she asked, trying to keep the awe out of her voice. "Summers and weekends," Nathan replied, his hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. "The main family house is in the Upper East Side." "Right. Of course, the summer house." Sophie shook her head. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Our idea of a summer house was opening the fire escape window." Nathan glanced at her, and she caught something vulnerable in his expression. "Were you happy growing up in Brooklyn?" The question surprised her. "Yeah. Actually, my parents worked hard, but we had family dinners every night, game nights on weekends. My mom would blast salsa music while she cooked, and my dad would dance with her in the kitchen." She paused. "Were you happy?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I knew what happy was supposed to feel like. I knew successful, accomplished, appropriate, but happy." He shrugged. That wasn't really the point. Sophie felt something tighten in her chest. Before she could respond, the front door of the mansion opened, and a woman who could only be Nathan's mother emerged. Margaret Sterling was exactly what Sophie had expected. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, pearl necklace, and an expression that could cut glass at 50 paces. "Showtime," Nathan murmured, getting out to open Sophie's door. "Remember," Sophie whispered as he helped her out, "I'm your girlfriend who makes you laugh and brings out your human side." "Right. And you're the woman who sees past the money to the devastatingly charming man beneath. Let's not oversell it." Nathan's laugh was genuine, and Sophie felt some of her nervousness ease. They could do this. It was just a performance. "Nathan, darling." Margaret Sterling's voice carried the kind of cultured authority that suggested she'd been chairing charity committees since birth. She offered her cheek for a kiss, her eyes already assessing Sophie with surgical precision. "Mother, I'd like you to meet Sophie Carter." "Sophie, this is my mother, Margaret Sterling." "Mrs. Sterling, it's such a pleasure to meet you." Sophie extended her hand with a warm smile. "Thank you so much for including me in your family brunch." Margaret's handshake was brief and cool. How refreshing. Nathan so rarely brings anyone to meet the family. Her tone suggested this wasn't necessarily a good thing. "You must be very special." "I certainly think so," Nathan said, his arm sliding around Sophie's waist with practiced ease. "Sophie runs her own digital marketing company. She's brilliant." "How industrious." Margaret's smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes. "And your family? Are they also in business?" Sophie felt the weight of the question, the subtle probe into her social standing, her worthiness to be in their world. "My father is a high school history teacher, and my mother manages a community center in Brooklyn. They're both retired now, but they taught me the value of hard work and treating people with kindness, regardless of their circumstances." Margaret's expression didn't change, but Sophie caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Strike one for the middle-class girl. How grounded of them. "Well, come along. The others are waiting on the terrace." As they walked through the mansion, Sophie tried not to gawk at the artwork that probably belonged in museums and the furniture that was definitely older than her entire family line. Nathan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You're doing great," he whispered. The terrace overlooked the Atlantic Ocean, and Sophie had to admit the view was spectacular. A table was set for 6 with what looked like actual silver and china that probably cost more than her car. "Nathan," a booming voice called out, and a man who was clearly Nathan's father approached with a golf club still in hand. Edward Sterling was silver-haired, distinguished, and had the kind of presence that suggested he was used to being the most important person in any room. "Dad." Nathan's posture straightened slightly. "This is Sophie Carter." "Sophie, my father, Edward Sterling." Edward's handshake was firm, his assessment quick but thorough. "Carter, can't say I'm familiar with the name. What business is your family in?" "Education and social services," Sophie replied smoothly. "Nothing as impressive as hospitality empires, but we're proud of the work we do." Edward's eyebrows rose slightly. "Admirable. Public service." Before Sophie could respond, a younger voice interrupted. "So, this is the famous Sophie." A woman about Sophie's age bounded over with the kind of enthusiasm that seemed genuine. She had Nathan's green eyes but softer features, and her smile was warm and welcoming. "Isabel, Nathan said with obvious affection. Meet Sophie. Sophie. My sister Isabel. Fair warning. She's the family interrogator. Only because I actually care about your happiness, Isabel said, giving Sophie a quick but thorough hug. Unlike some people who shall remain nameless, but are currently glaring at us from across the terrace, Sophie followed Isabel's glance to see a tall, impeccably dressed man watching them with obvious displeasure. That would be my charming brother-in-law, William Prescott, Nathan said quietly. Isabel's husband and, unfortunately, the Sterling Hotel's chief financial officer. He doesn't look happy to see me, Sophie observed. He's not happy to see anyone who might interfere with his succession plans, Isabel said with a roll of her eyes. He's been campaigning to be the next CEO since he married into the family. Isabel. Margaret's voice carried a warning tone. Perhaps we could save the family politics for after brunch. Of course, Mother wouldn't want to make our guest uncomfortable with reality. As they settled around the table, Sophie found herself seated between Nathan and Isabel, with Margaret and Edward across from them and William at the head of the table like he was already running the company. So, Sophie, William began, cutting into his eggs Benedict with precision. Nathan tells us, you run some sort of internet business? Digital marketing? Sophie corrected politely. We help small and medium-sized businesses compete in the online marketplace. How quaint. William's tone suggested he found it anything but. And how exactly did you two meet? Sophie and Nathan exchanged a quick glance. They'd prepared for this question. At a coffee shop in Manhattan, Nathan said. Sophie literally knocked me off my feet. More like knocked some sense into you, Sophie added with a grin, and Nathan laughed. It was the most honest conversation I'd had in years, Nathan continued, his hand finding Sophie's on the table. She treated me like a regular person, not a bank account with legs. Margaret's lips pursed slightly. How refreshing it really was, Isabel said enthusiastically. You should have seen Nathan before, Sophie. He was all work and no play. Now he actually smiles in public. People change, William said dismissively. Usually temporarily. What William means, Margaret interjected smoothly, is that Nathan has had phases before. Remember that artist you dated, darling? What was her name? The one who wanted to paint murals in the hotel lobbies. Sophie felt Nathan tense beside her. Clara was a talented artist. I'm sure she was, dear, but hardly appropriate for someone in your position. And what position is that exactly? Sophie asked, her voice sweet but with an edge that made Isabel's eyes light up with interest. Margaret's smile grew cooler. The position of someone who will inherit one of the largest hospitality empires in the country, someone who needs a partner who understands the responsibilities that come with that. You mean someone who comes from the right family and won't embarrass you at charity galas, Sophie said with perfect clarity. The table went silent. Edward's eyebrows rose. William looked delighted at the potential drama. Isabel was practically vibrating with excitement. Sophie, Nathan started, but she held up a gentle hand. It's okay, she said to him, then turned back to Margaret. Mrs. Sterling, I understand your concerns. You don't know me. You don't know my family, and you want to protect Nathan and your family's reputation. That's actually pretty admirable. Margaret looked slightly taken aback by the reasonable response. But here's the thing, Sophie continued, her voice warm but firm. I'm not trying to marry into your family for money or status. I have my own career that I love, my own goals, and my own sense of worth that has nothing to do with how much money is in my bank account. She turned to look at Nathan, and the warmth in her eyes wasn't entirely fabricated. What I care about is that Nathan makes me laugh. He challenges me to think bigger about my business. He listens when I talk about my dreams, and when he smiles, really smiles, not that polite thing he does at business dinners. It's like the sun coming out. Nathan was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Around the table, everyone was silent. Plus, Sophie added with a grin, he's not bad to look at. Isabel burst out laughing. Oh, I like her. I really, really like her. Even Edward cracked a smile. She's got spirit. I'll give her that. Margaret, however, remained unmoved. Spirit is all well and good, dear, but marriage. Who said anything about marriage? Sophie interrupted. We're dating. We're getting to know each other. Isn't that how these things are supposed to work? Not in our world, William said coldly. In our world, relationships are strategic alliances, partnerships that benefit both families. Sophie turned to him with genuine curiosity. That sounds incredibly lonely. It's practical. Is it working out for you? Sophie asked innocently. The strategic alliance approach? Isabel nearly choked on her mimosa. William's face reddened. "Sophie," Nathan said quietly, but she could hear the amusement in his voice. "Sorry," Sophie said, not sounding sorry at all. "I just think love should be about more than tax benefits and social connections." "Love?" Margaret's voice was sharp. "You're in love with my son?" Sophie felt the trap closing around her. This was the moment. Say yes and commit to a lie that could spiral out of control, or say no and undermine the entire charade. She looked at Nathan, seeing the question in his eyes, the careful hope he was trying to hide. "I'm falling," she said quietly, and it was terrifying how much truth was in those two words. Nathan's hand tightened on hers, and when he smiled, it was that real smile she'd mentioned, the one that did feel like sunshine. "So am I," he said, and Sophie's heart skipped because she couldn't tell if he was acting anymore either. The rest of brunch passed in a blur of polite conversation and family stories. Isabel regaled Sophie with embarrassing tales from Nathan's childhood, while Margaret maintained her cool disapproval, and William continued to radiate hostility. As they prepared to leave, Edward pulled Nathan aside for a private conversation, while Margaret cornered Sophie near the rose garden. "You seem like a nice enough girl," Margaret began, her tone suggesting this wasn't entirely a compliment. "But you need to understand what you're getting into." "What do you mean?" "Nathan isn't just a man, dear. He's a sterling. That comes with responsibilities, expectations, a way of life that—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "That people from your background often find overwhelming." Sophie felt her temper flare but kept her voice level. "What exactly is my background, Mrs. Sterling?" "Working class. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it's different. The pressures of this family, the scrutiny, the social obligations, it changes people, and not always for the better." "Are you trying to scare me off?" Margaret's smile was razor sharp. "I'm trying to protect you both. Nathan has a tendency to romanticize things that are different from his world, but the novelty always wears off, and then you're left with incompatible lives and broken hearts." "Maybe," Sophie said carefully. "The problem isn't that Nathan romanticizes different worlds. Maybe the problem is that his world is so narrow and cold that anything with genuine warmth feels revolutionary." Margaret's eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you, Mrs. Sterling?" Sophie interrupted gently. "I can see that you love your son, but loving someone means wanting them to be happy, not just appropriate." Before Margaret could respond, Nathan appeared at Sophie's side. "Ready to go?" he asked, and Sophie could see the tension around his eyes. "More than ready." As they drove away from the estate, Sophie and Nathan were both quiet for several miles. Finally, Nathan spoke. "That was a disaster. I was going to say intense, but disaster works, too." He glanced at her. "You were incredible, by the way you handled my mother, William's passive-aggressive attacks, the whole marriage interrogation. I may have gotten a little carried away with the 'I'm falling' comment," Sophie admitted. "Sorry if that put you in an awkward position." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "About that," Sophie's heart started beating faster. "Yeah? The thing is," he pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her fully. "I don't think I was acting either." The admission hung between them like a live wire. Sophie stared at him, searching his face for any sign that this was part of the performance. "Nathan, I know this complicates everything. I know we have a contract and boundaries and this whole fake relationship thing. But Sophie, I can't stop thinking about you, not just when we're together for appearances, but all the time, the way you laugh, the way you challenge me, the way you make everything feel real." Sophie's mind was spinning. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had rules, boundaries, a clear business arrangement. "This is a really bad idea," she said quietly. "Terrible idea," he agreed. "It could ruin everything. Probably will." They stared at each other for a long moment, the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly beside them. "So, what do we do?" Sophie asked. Nathan reached over and cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing her cheek. "I have absolutely no idea." And then he kissed her. It wasn't a performance kiss or a photo op kiss. It was soft and tentative and full of questions. Neither of them knew how to answer. Sophie felt herself melting into it, her hands fisting in his shirt as all her carefully constructed walls came tumbling down. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "That was—" Sophie began. "A complication," Nathan finished. "A big one, Hugo." But neither of them moved away. Instead, Nathan rested his forehead against hers, and Sophie closed her eyes, trying to figure out when exactly she'd stopped pretending to fall for Nathan Sterling and started actually falling. "What happens now?" she whispered. "I don't know," Nathan admitted, "but I'm tired of pretending that what I feel for you is fake." Sophie opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. She saw the vulnerability he was trying to hide, the hope he was afraid to acknowledge, the fear that she might walk away now that things had gotten real. "Your mother thinks I'm all wrong for you," she said. "My mother thinks a lot of things. Doesn't mean she's right. Your whole family expects you to marry someone from your world. Maybe it's time I stopped living my life according to everyone else's expectations." Sophie wanted to believe him. She wanted to throw caution to the wind and dive headfirst into whatever this was becoming. But she'd built her entire life on being practical, on making smart choices, on protecting herself from exactly this kind of situation. "Nathan, if we do this, if we make this real, there's no going back to the contract and the boundaries and the safety net of it all being fake. I know, and if it doesn't work out, then we'll deal with that when we come to it." Nathan's hand found hers again. "Sophie, I've spent my entire life playing it safe, doing what was expected, following the predetermined path, and I've never been more miserable." He paused, his green eyes intense and sincere. "You make me want to be brave." Sophie felt her last defenses crumble. "This is crazy, completely insane. We barely know each other. Then let's change that." Sophie looked out at the ocean, then back at Nathan's hopeful face. She thought about her safe, predictable life in Brooklyn, her carefully planned business goals, her determination to never depend on anyone else for her happiness. Then she thought about the way Nathan made her laugh, the way he looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the world, the way his smile could make her forget all her rational objections. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, let's try this, the real version, not the fake one." Nathan's smile was brilliant. "Really? Really? But I have conditions." "Of course you do. We take it slow. We figure out who we are together when there aren't cameras or contracts, or your family's expectations involved. And if it doesn't work—" She took a deep breath. "If it doesn't work, we walk away before we destroy each other." "Deal," Nathan said, lifting their joined hands to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. 3 weeks later, Manhattan, Sophie was discovering that dating a billionaire was both everything she'd expected and nothing like she'd imagined. The perks were undeniable. Nathan had taken her to restaurants where reservations were booked months in advance, to Broadway shows from box seats that made her feel like royalty, to art gallery openings, where she found herself discussing contemporary sculpture with people whose names she recognized from museum plaques. But it was the quiet moments that surprised her most. Nathan showing up at her tiny Brooklyn apartment with takeout from her favorite Thai place, perfectly content to eat on her thrift store couch while she explained her latest marketing campaign. The way he listened, really listened, when she talked about her dreams of expanding her business, how he'd started asking her opinion on everything from his company's new sustainability initiatives to what tie he should wear to board meetings. "You're different with her." Isabel had told him over lunch the previous week when Sophie had excused herself to take a business call. "Lighter, more you." Nathan had known exactly what his sister meant around Sophie. He didn't feel the constant weight of being the sterling heir. He felt like Nathan. Just Nathan. And it was intoxicating, which made what happened on that Tuesday morning in October so much more devastating. Sophie was in her office reviewing quarterly projections with her business partner Lila when her assistant knocked on the door. "Sophie, there are some people here to see you. They say it's about Nathan Sterling." Sophie's stomach dropped. She'd been dreading this moment when their relationship became public enough to attract the wrong kind of attention. 2 people entered her small conference room, a sharp-dressed woman with a briefcase, and a man with a camera who definitely wasn't from any society magazine. "Miss Carter," the woman began, settling into a chair without being invited. "I'm Lauren Kim from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. This is Detective Sanchez from the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit." Lila's eyes went wide. Sophie felt the room start to spin. "I'm sorry. What is this about?" "We're investigating allegations of financial fraud involving Sterling Hotels and several of their subsidiary companies," Detective Sanchez said. Pulling out a notepad, "Your name has come up in connection with our investigation." "That's impossible. I don't have any business dealings with Sterling Hotels, but you do have a personal relationship with Nathan Sterling," Lauren Kim said, consulting her file. "And you recently received a substantial payment from a Sterling family trust, nearly $500,000. Sophie's mouth went dry. The contract payment, of course, it had come from a family trust. She should have realized that would leave a paper trail, That was for consulting work. Consulting work? Detective Sanchez looked skeptical. What kind of consulting work does a small digital marketing firm do for a billion-dollar hospitality empire? Sophie's mind raced. She couldn't tell them about the fake relationship contract without exposing Nathan to embarrassment and potentially worse legal complications, but she also couldn't come up with a convincing lie on the spot. I helped with their digital marketing strategy for $500,000. Lauren Kim's eyebrows rose. That's quite a generous fee for marketing advice, Miss Carter. Detective Sanchez leaned forward. We have evidence suggesting that several payments like yours were made to individuals in Mr. Sterling's social circle around the same time that large sums were being moved out of company accounts. We need to understand the nature of your relationship with Mr. Sterling and exactly what services you provided in exchange for that payment. Sophie felt sick. Am I being accused of something? Not at this time, Lauren Kim said carefully, but we would appreciate your cooperation in our investigation, and we'd advise you not to discuss this conversation with Mr. Sterling until we've had a chance to interview him separately. After they left, Sophie sat in her empty conference room, staring at the wall and trying to process what had just happened. Lila finally broke the silence. Sophie, what the heck was that about? What payment were they talking about? Sophie closed her eyes. She'd never told Lila the real reason she'd suddenly been able to make payroll for the next year. Her best friend and business partner thought Sophie had landed a huge new client. It's complicated. Complicated how, Sophie? The NYPD just asked you about financial fraud. That's not complicated. That's terrifying. Before Sophie could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Can't wait to see you tonight. Dinner at Ort. Sophie stared at the message, remembering Detective Sanchez's warning not to discuss the investigation with Nathan. How was she supposed to sit across from him at dinner and pretend everything was normal? Her phone rang. Nathan's name appeared on the screen. Hey, she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Hey, yourself. You sound weird. Everything okay? Yeah. Just a busy day. Listen, about tonight. Please don't cancel, Nathan interrupted. I have something I want to talk to you about. Something important. Sophie's heart sank even further. Nathan, it's good news, I promise. Well, I hope you'll think it's good news. Just don't cancel, okay? After she hung up, Sophie put her head in her hands. Whatever Nathan wanted to discuss, she had a sinking feeling it was going to make everything infinitely more complicated. Meanwhile, across town at Sterling Hotel's headquarters, Nathan was having the best day he'd had in years, right up until his father summoned him to the executive floor. He just finished presenting his new hospitality innovation proposal to the board, a plan to convert several of their older properties into eco-friendly boutique hotels that would appeal to younger, environmentally conscious travelers. The presentation had gone better than he'd hoped, with even the most conservative board members expressing cautious optimism. More importantly, he'd felt confident and passionate in a way he hadn't in years. Sophie's influence, he knew, she'd helped him find his voice, encouraged him to think beyond the traditional Sterling approach. He was already planning how to tell her about the success over dinner when his father's assistant intercepted him in the hallway. Your father needs to see you immediately, she said, her expression unreadable. Conference room A. Nathan found his father standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the door. Edward Sterling's posture was rigid, and Nathan immediately knew something was wrong. Dad, you wanted to see me? Edward turned around, and Nathan was shocked by the anger in his father's face. Sit down, Nathan. I'd rather stand. I said sit down. Nathan had heard that tone exactly 3 times in his life: when he'd crashed his first car at 16, when he'd been caught cheating on his SATs, and when he'd announced he was dropping out of Harvard Business School to study hospitality in Switzerland. Each time, it had preceded a conversation that had fundamentally changed the trajectory of his life. We have a problem, Edward began, placing a manila folder on the conference table. A significant problem that threatens everything we've built. Nathan opened the folder and felt his world tilt on its axis. FBI financial investigation documents, subpoenas, bank records, and in the middle of it all, a highlighted transaction, a payment of $450,000 to Sophie Carter Consulting. Dad, I can explain. Can you? Edward's voice was ice cold. Can you explain why, during a federal investigation into potential money laundering and tax evasion, my son made a $500,000 payment to his girlfriend's company? Can you explain how that looks to investigators who are already questioning our family's financial practices? Nathan's mind raced. It's not what it looks like. Then what is it, Nathan? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you used company funds to pay your girlfriend. And now we're all under federal investigation. I didn't use company funds. I used my personal trust. Your personal trust that's funded by company profits. Edward slammed his hand on the table. Everything is connected, Nathan. Every dollar that goes through our family accounts is scrutinized when we're under investigation. Nathan felt sick. He'd never considered that the payment to Sophie could be traced back to company funds, could implicate the entire family business in wrongdoing. What kind of investigation are we talking about? Edward pulled out another document. Money laundering, tax evasion, potential fraud. Someone tipped off the FBI that we've been moving large sums of money through shell companies and paying out suspicious consulting fees to individuals with no apparent business relationship to our company. But Sophie does have a business relationship with us now. She's been helping with digital marketing strategies for $500,000. Edward's laugh was bitter. Nathan, she runs a small firm in Brooklyn. Her biggest client before you was probably a local restaurant. No one is going to believe we paid her $500,000 for marketing advice. Nathan realized the trap they'd walked into. In trying to make the payment look legitimate, they'd made it look even more suspicious. Who tipped off the FBI? Edward's expression darkened. We have our suspicions. Before Nathan could ask what that meant, the conference room door opened, and William Prescott walked in, looking perfectly composed and faintly satisfied. William, Edward said, I've just been explaining the situation to Nathan. Unfortunate business, William said, settling into a chair. I've been reviewing our options with the legal team. Nathan looked between his father and brother-in-law, a cold suspicion growing in his chest. What options? The FBI wants to interview everyone involved, Edward said. Family members, employees, anyone who received significant payments in the last 6 months, including Sophie, William added helpfully. Nathan's blood ran cold. You're going to drag Sophie into this? She's already in it, Edward said harshly. The moment you decided to use family money to pay your girlfriend, you made her part of this investigation. She didn't do anything wrong. Maybe not, William said smoothly. But the optics are terrible. The heir to a hotel empire paying large sums to his girlfriend right before a federal investigation. It looks like either corruption or money laundering. Nathan stared at William, pieces clicking into place. You did this. I'm sorry. You tipped off the FBI. You've been looking for a way to discredit me. And you found it. William's expression didn't change, but Nathan caught a flash of something that might have been satisfaction. That's a serious accusation, Nathan. I hope you have proof. Boys, Edward interrupted. This isn't the time for family politics. We need to focus on damage control. What kind of damage control? Nathan asked. Edward and William exchanged a look that made Nathan's stomach drop. The board is meeting tomorrow morning, Edward said carefully. Given the circumstances, they're going to vote on whether you should be removed from the CEO succession plan. Nathan felt like he'd been punched. What? It's temporary, Edward said quickly, until this investigation is resolved and we can clear up any questions about your judgment. My judgment? Nathan, William said with fake sympathy, you have to understand how this looks. You've been making erratic decisions, dating outside your social circle, and now there's a federal investigation involving payments to your girlfriend. The board has to consider the company's reputation. Nathan looked at his father. And you agree with this? Edward's face was pained but resolute. I think you need to step back until we can sort this out. Take some time away from the company. Let the investigation run its course. You're suspending me. We're protecting you, William corrected. And protecting the company. Nathan stood up slowly, his mind reeling. In the span of 20 minutes, he'd gone from the heir apparent to a company pariah under federal investigation. What about Sophie? What about her? Edward asked. She is going to be questioned by the FBI because of a payment I made to her. Her business, her reputation, everything could be destroyed because of me. That's unfortunate, William said. But it's out of our hands now. Nathan looked at his brother-in-law with new understanding. This wasn't just about removing him from the succession plan. This was about destroying his relationship with Sophie, isolating him from anyone who made him happy, ensuring he came back to the family business grateful and compliant. You magnificent snake, Nathan said quietly. William smiled. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Nathan turned to his father. Dad, you're being played. William orchestrated this whole thing. Nathan. Edward's voice held a warning. You're upset. Don't say something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not seeing this coming. Nathan headed for the door, then turned back. When this investigation clears our family, and it will, I hope you'll remember who stood by you and who threw you under the bus for personal gain. Nathan. Edward started. I'm going to protect Sophie, Nathan said firmly. Whatever it takes. That evening at dinner, Sophie arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes late, her mind still spinning from the morning's FBI visit. Nathan was already seated at their usual corner table, but something was off. His smile seemed forced, and there were tension lines around his eyes she'd never seen before. Sorry I'm late, she said, sliding into her chair. Crazy day. Mine, too, Nathan said, and Sophie caught something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully. Everything okay? Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. Actually, there's something I need to tell you. Something important. Sophie's heart started racing. This was it. He was going to tell her about the investigation, and she'd have to pretend she didn't already know. Nathan, I love you. Sophie's world stopped. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. What? I love you, Nathan repeated, his green eyes intense and sincere. I know it's crazy and we haven't been together that long, but Sophie, I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You make me want to be better, braver, more honest. You make me feel like myself. Sophie stared at him, her heart breaking. Here was the man she'd fallen completely, hopelessly in love with, telling her he loved her back, and she couldn't even enjoy the moment because she knew their entire relationship was about to implode. Nathan, I know it's a lot, he continued, misreading her hesitation, and I'm not asking you to say it back if you're not ready. I just needed you to know because whatever happens, whatever challenges we face, I want to face them together. Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. Whatever happens, Nathan's expression grew serious. There are some complications with my family. With the business, things might get difficult for a while. But Sophie, if you're willing to weather the storm with me, I think we can get through anything. He was giving her an out, Sophie realized, warning her that things were about to get complicated, offering her a chance to walk away before the investigation became public. It would be so easy to take it, to say she wasn't ready for complications, that they should take a break until things settled down. She could protect her business, her reputation, her heart. But looking at Nathan's hopeful face, thinking about everything they'd built together, Sophie knew she couldn't walk away, not now, not when he needed her most. I love you too, she said quietly. Nathan's smile was brilliant. Really? Really? She squeezed his hand. And whatever these complications are, we'll handle them together. Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles softly. I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, I disagree. They ordered dinner and tried to maintain normal conversation, but Sophie could see the worry Nathan was trying to hide. She wanted to tell him about the FBI visit, to share the burden of what was coming. But Detective Sanchez's warning echoed in her mind. It wasn't until they were walking back to Nathan's car that Sophie's phone rang. Lila's name appeared on the screen. I should take this, Sophie said apologetically. Work stuff. Sophie. Lila's voice was tight with panic. Thank goodness. You need to get down here right now. What's wrong? The FBI is here at the office with a search warrant. Sophie felt the blood drain from her face. What? They're going through everything. Our files, our computers, our financial records. Sophie, what the heck is going on? Nathan was watching her face, and she saw the moment he realized something was terribly wrong. Lila, I'll be right there. She hung up and looked at Nathan, who was already pulling out his own phone. Sophie. But he stopped, staring at his screen. I have 12 missed calls from my father. They looked at each other, both understanding that whatever they'd been trying to protect each other from had just exploded into the open. The FBI searched your office, Nathan said quietly. It wasn't a question. You already knew about the investigation, Sophie replied, equally quiet. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. So was I. They stood on the sidewalk, people walking around them, the city continuing to move while their world crumbled. Sophie, Nathan said carefully, the payment I made to you, it's part of the investigation. They think it looks like money laundering or fraud. I know. They came to see me this morning. Nathan closed his eyes. This is my fault. I never should have involved you in my family's business. Nathan, no. Listen to me. He opened his eyes, and Sophie saw desperation there. This is going to get ugly. My family, the media, the investigation, they're going to come after you. They're going to try to destroy your business, your reputation, everything you've worked for. We'll fight it. Sophie, you don't understand. My brother-in-law has been planning this. He wants me out of the company, and he's willing to destroy anyone who stands in his way, including you. Sophie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October evening. What are you saying? Nathan took her hands in his, and she could see the pain in his face. I'm saying maybe we should take a break until this investigation is over, until the danger to you passes. You want to break up? I want to protect you. Sophie pulled her hands away. From what? From you? From your family? From the investigation? From all of it? Sophie stared at him. Understanding. Dawning. You think if we're not together, they'll leave me alone. I think if you're not connected to me, you have a better chance of surviving this intact. And what about us? Nathan's smile was heartbreaking. There might not be an us to save if I don't protect you now. Sophie felt something crack inside her chest. So that's it. The first real crisis we face. And you want to run? I want to keep you safe. I didn't ask you to keep me safe, Nathan. I asked you to love me. I do love you. That's why I have to do this. Sophie looked at the man she'd fallen in love with, the man who'd just told her he loved her back, and realized he was about to walk away from everything they'd built together. You know what I think? She said, her voice steadier than she felt. I think you're scared, not of the investigation, not of your brother-in-law, but of fighting for something that matters, of choosing love over the easy path. Nathan flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? Your whole life, you've done what other people expected, what was safe, what was appropriate, what kept everyone happy. And the first time you have to choose between what other people want and what you want, you're already backing down. Sophie, please understand. I understand perfectly. Sophie's voice was cold now, anger and hurt, mixing into something sharp and cutting. I understand that you talk a good game about being brave and choosing love, but when it actually matters, you're just another rich boy who runs home to daddy when things get complicated. Nathan looked like she'd slapped him again. Sophie. Goodbye, Nathan. Sophie turned and walked away, not trusting herself to look back. Behind her, she could hear Nathan calling her name, but she didn't stop. It wasn't until she was in a taxi heading back to Brooklyn that she let herself cry. 2 days later, Sophie sat in her apartment surrounded by legal documents and newspaper clippings. The story had broken that morning. FBI investigates Sterling Hotels in money laundering probe. Her name was mentioned in the 3rd paragraph. Her phone had been ringing non-stop reporters. Potential clients canceling contracts. Friends calling to check if she was okay. Lila was fielding calls at the office, trying to keep their remaining clients from jumping ship. The doorbell rang, and Sophie considered not answering it. She wasn't in the mood for more reporters or FBI agents or anyone else who wanted to pick apart her life. But when she looked through the peephole, she saw Isabel Sterling standing in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Sophie opened the door. Isabel? Hi. Isabel held up a bottle of wine and a bag of what looked like takeout. I brought reinforcements. Can I come in? Sophie stepped aside, and Isabel entered her small apartment, looking around with obvious curiosity. This is nice, Isabel said, and she sounded like she meant it. Very real. It's about to be really empty if I can't save my business. Isabel set the wine and food on Sophie's coffee table. That's actually why I'm here. Well, partly. I don't understand. Isabel sat down on Sophie's couch and looked directly at her. I know what William did. I know he orchestrated this whole investigation to get Nathan out of the succession plan. Sophie felt a flicker of hope. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I'm working on it. Isabel paused. I also know my brother is an idiot. Despite everything, Sophie almost smiled. Which brother? The one who thinks he's protecting you by breaking your heart. Sophie sat down across from Isabel. He told you what happened? He didn't have to. He looks like someone ran over his puppy. Plus, he's been staying at my place for 2 days, eating ice cream and watching old romantic comedies. It's pathetic. He left you? He left everyone, moved out of his apartment, took a leave of absence from the company, basically went into hiding. Isabel opened the wine with practiced efficiency. He thinks if he disappears, the investigation will focus on him and leave you alone. Will it? Probably not. William wants to destroy anyone who matters to Nathan. That includes you. Sophie felt exhaustion wash over her. So, what am I supposed to do? My business is falling apart. My reputation is in ruins. And the man I love thinks the best way to help me is to abandon me. You fight, Isabel said simply. You fight for your business, your reputation. And yes, even for my stupid brother. Isabel, I can't. Sophie, can I tell you something about Nathan that he probably never told you? Sophie nodded. When we were kids, Nathan had this dog. A golden retriever named Max. Nathan loved that dog more than anything in the world. But when Nathan was 12, our father decided Max was becoming a distraction from Nathan's studies, so he had the dog sent away to live on a farm upstate. Sophie's heart clenched. That's awful. Nathan was devastated. But you know what he did? He accepted it. He thanked our father for making the responsible decision and never mentioned Max again. Isabel took a sip of wine. That's what Nathan does when he loves something. He lets other people convince him it's for the best to give it up. So, what changed? What made him different with me? You did. For the first time in his life, Nathan fought for something he wanted. He stood up to our mother, defied family expectations, chose love over duty. Isabel leaned forward, but now he's scared that loving you will destroy you the way staying in our family destroyed him. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. What if he's right? What if being with him will destroy me? What if it won't? Isabel countered. What if fighting for each other makes you both stronger? Sophie looked around her apartment at the legal documents, the canceled contracts, the evidence of her life falling apart. I don't know how to fight this, Isabel. I'm not built for corporate warfare and family politics and federal investigations. Maybe not, Isabel said with a smile that reminded Sophie strongly of Nathan. But you're built for love, and sometimes that's the most powerful weapon of all. Sophie stared at her, feeling something shift inside her chest. Maybe Isabel was right. Maybe running away wasn't the answer. Maybe it was time to fight. What did you have in mind? Sophie asked. Isabel's smile turned wicked. How do you feel about a little corporate espionage? 10 days later, multiple locations across Manhattan. Sophie had never imagined herself as the kind of person who would break into a corporate office at midnight. But then again, 3 weeks ago, she'd never imagined herself falling in love with a billionaire or being investigated by the FBI either. Life, she was learning, had a way of pushing you into roles you never auditioned for. Are you sure about this? Lila whispered from beside her as they crouched in the stairwell of the Sterling Hotel's headquarters building. Because if we get caught, I was helping my best friend commit corporate espionage to save her relationship, is not going to look good on my resume. We're not committing corporate espionage, Sophie whispered back, adjusting the strap of her laptop bag. We're conducting an independent investigation into potential fraud. Isabel gave us the access codes. Isabel is Nathan's sister. This feels like a family conspiracy. It is a family conspiracy, came Isabel's voice from the comm device in Sophie's ear. She was coordinating from her apartment, hacking into security cameras and guiding them through the building remotely. And we're the good guys. Now stop talking and move. You have a narrow window before the night security guard does his next round. Sophie and Lila made their way up to the 28th floor, where William Prescott's corner office overlooked the Hudson River. According to Isabel, William had been sloppy in covering his tracks, overconfident that his plan to frame Nathan would work without scrutiny. His computer should be unlocked. Isabel's voice crackled through the earpiece. He never logs out because he thinks he's untouchable. Look for anything with Meridian Holdings or Coastal Development Partners in the file name. Sophie slipped behind William's massive desk, her fingers flying across his keyboard. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using her digital marketing skills to expose corporate fraud. Lila kept watch by the door, her phone ready to alert them if anyone approached. Found something, Sophie murmured. A folder labeled Project Reset, with dozens of financial documents. Download everything, Isabel instructed. And Sophie, look for anything referencing FBI contacts or whistleblower communications. As Sophie copied files to her encrypted drive, she scanned through the documents. What she found made her blood run cold. William hadn't just tipped off the FBI about suspicious payments from Sterling hotels. He'd been orchestrating a systematic embezzlement scheme for years, using shell companies and fake consulting contracts to siphon money from the family business. The payment to Sophie wasn't suspicious because it was fraud. It was suspicious because it was legitimate, and it broke the pattern of all the actual fraudulent payments William had been making to his own network of fake companies. Lila, Sophie whispered urgently. He's been stealing from them for years, millions of dollars. That's nice, but can we discuss it somewhere that isn't a felony to be in? Sophie was about to agree when she found a folder that made her heart stop. Nathan's succession removal. Inside were detailed plans for destroying Nathan's reputation, including communications with FBI contacts, planted stories for gossip columnists, and a comprehensive strategy for isolating Nathan from anyone who might support him. At the bottom of the folder was a document that made Sophie's hands shake with rage. Personal targets for elimination. Her name was at the top of the list. Followed by Isabel and several of Nathan's friends and business associates, William had detailed plans for destroying each of their lives, complete with timelines and specific methods. Sophie. Lila's voice was sharp with panic. Someone's coming. We need to go now. Sophie grabbed the external drive and her laptop, but as they headed for the door, she heard Isabel's voice in her earpiece, tight with worry. Sophie, stop. Don't leave yet. Isabel, we have to. Trust me. Hide. Both of you. Behind the desk right now. Sophie and Lila dove behind William's desk, just as the office door opened. Through the gap in the desk panels, Sophie could see 2 sets of expensive shoes enter the room. Are you certain this will work? The first voice was William's, cold and calculating. The FBI is convinced, replied the second voice, which Sophie recognized as belonging to Margaret Sterling, Nathan's mother. Nathan's fingerprints are all over the shell company documents we planted in his apartment. By tomorrow morning, he'll be arrested for embezzlement and money laundering. Sophie's blood turned to ice. They were framing Nathan for William's crimes. And the girl? William asked. Sophie Carter will be charged as an accomplice, Margaret said dismissively. Her business will be destroyed. Her reputation ruined. She'll be lucky if she doesn't serve prison time. Sophie felt Lila grab her hand, squeezing tight to keep her from doing something rash. You're certain Edward will support this? William continued. Edward wants the scandal to end, and he wants Nathan to learn his place in this family. Margaret replied. When Nathan is cleared of the charges after serving enough time to humble him, he'll be grateful to return to the company on our terms, without the distractions of inappropriate relationships or misguided independence, and I'll be CEO, as was always the plan. Nathan was never suited for leadership too soft, too emotional, too willing to put personal feelings above family interests. Sophie had heard enough. She pulled out her phone and started recording the conversation, her hands trembling with rage. The FBI raid is scheduled for tomorrow at dawn, Margaret continued. Nathan's apartment, his office, and Carter's business. By noon, both of them will be in custody. Perfect. And Isabel? Isabel will fall in line once she sees what happens to people who oppose family decisions. She's always been smarter than Nathan. As their footsteps retreated, Sophie and Lila remained frozen behind the desk until Isabel's voice came through the earpiece. They're gone. You can come out now. Sophie stood on shaking legs, her mind reeling from what she'd just heard. Margaret Sterling, Nathan's own mother, was actively participating in destroying him and everyone he cared about. Did you get all of that? Isabel asked as Sophie and Lila made their way quickly to the elevator. Every word, Sophie confirmed, checking her phone recording. Isabel, we have to warn Nathan. They're going to arrest him tomorrow morning. I know. I heard everything through your phone. Isabel's voice was tight with emotion. My own mother. I knew she disapproved of you, but I never thought. Where is Nathan? Lila asked as they reached the lobby. That's the problem, Isabel said. He's been hiding from everyone, including me, but I have an idea where he might be. Meanwhile, at a small hotel in Queens, Nathan Sterling was discovering that heartbreak had a specific taste. Bitter coffee at 2 a.m., cold pizza for breakfast, and the metallic flavor of regret that coated everything he tried to eat. He'd been hiding in a modest hotel in Queens for over a week, paying cash and using a fake name to avoid being found by his family, the FBI, or the press, more importantly, to avoid being found by Sophie. Every day, he told himself he'd made the right choice. Every day, he picked up his phone to call her and forced himself to put it down. He'd seen the news coverage of the investigation spreading to her business, read the articles questioning her integrity, watched from afar as his decision to love her destroyed everything she'd worked for. This was why people like him didn't fall in love with people like her. This was why his family had rules, expectations, boundaries. This was why he should have stuck to dating women from his own world, who understood the cost of being involved with the Sterling name. But even as he told himself these things, Nathan couldn't stop thinking about Sophie's laugh. The way she challenged him to be better. The look in her eyes when she'd told him she loved him. He couldn't stop wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life by walking away. His phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. Isabel's name appeared on the screen. I told you I'm not coming home, he said without preamble. Nathan, shut up and listen to me. You're in danger. Réel danger. Something in his sister's voice made Nathan sit up straighter. What are you talking about? William and Mother have been working together. They've framed you for William's embezzlement scheme. The FBI is going to arrest you tomorrow morning. Nathan felt the room spin. That's impossible. It's not only possible, it's happening. They planted evidence in your apartment, Nathan, financial documents linking you to shell companies that William created to steal money from the family business. But I know you never. Sophie and I know you never. But the FBI doesn't know that, and they have what looks like solid evidence that you've been embezzling millions of dollars. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, trying to process what Isabel was telling him. Sophie knows about this? Sophie is the one who figured it out. She and Lila broke into William's office tonight and found everything: his real financial records, his plans to destroy you, his communications with the FBI. Sophie broke into William's office. Nathan couldn't hide the admiration in his voice. Turns out your girlfriend is a lot tougher than you gave her credit for. She's been fighting for you even after you abandoned her like an idiot. Nathan closed his eyes. Guilt and love and regret, washing over him in equal measure. Isabel, I was trying to protect her. You were trying to protect yourself from having to fight for something that mattered, just like you've done your whole life. The accusation hit like a physical blow. That's not, it is fair, and you know it. Nathan, do you remember when Father sent Max away? Nathan's throat tightened at the mention of his childhood dog. What does that have to do with anything? You let them convince you it was for the best. You didn't fight. You didn't argue. You just accepted that loving something meant losing it, and you've been doing the same thing ever since. Max was a dog. Isabel, this is Sophie's life, her future, and she's willing to fight for it. She's willing to fight for you, for your relationship, for the truth. But you ran away because fighting is scary and losing is possible. And it's easier to give up than risk failure. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his sister's words hitting deeper than he wanted to admit. What if I fight and lose anyway? What if loving her really does destroy her? Then at least she'll know you thought she was worth fighting for. Before Nathan could respond, he heard voices in the hotel hallway outside his room, loud voices, official voices, the kind that meant authority and trouble. Isabel, he whispered urgently. I think someone's here. What do you mean someone's here? The voices were getting closer, and Nathan could make out words now. Room 237, warrant. Sterling, the FBI. They found me. Nathan, listen to me very carefully. Isabel's voice was sharp with urgency. Do not let them arrest you tonight. If they take you into custody now, William and Mother will have time to solidify their frame job. You need to get out of there and meet us. Meet you where? Sophie has a plan. She's going to clear your name, but she needs you to trust her. The voices were right outside his door now. Nathan could hear them discussing tactical positions, preparing to knock. Isabel, I don't think I can, Nathan. Isabel's voice was soft now, full of the love and faith she'd always had in him. Sophie slapped you in a coffee shop because you were being an arrogant jerk. She's been fighting the FBI and our family and half of Manhattan because you're worth it. Don't you think it's time you started fighting for her, too? The knock came at the door, loud and authoritative. FBI, open up. Nathan looked around the small hotel room at the life he'd been hiding in, at the man he'd become when he'd stopped fighting for what mattered. Where do I meet you? He asked. Isabel's smile was audible through the phone. Brooklyn, Sophie's apartment. And Nathan? Yeah, bring your A-game. We're about to take on the family business. Nathan grabbed his jacket and headed for the window, grateful that Queens hotels weren't built for security. As he climbed down the fire escape, he could hear the FBI agents breaking down his door. For the first time in weeks, he was running toward something instead of away from it. 3 hours later, Sophie's apartment in Brooklyn. Sophie had never seen her small apartment, so crowded with people planning what was essentially a corporate coup. Isabel sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by laptops and legal documents. Lila was on the couch with her own computer, coordinating with several of their freelance tech contractors who specialized in digital forensics. And pacing by the window, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, was Michael Lee, Sophie's ex-boyfriend from college, who happened to be an investigative journalist for the Wall Street Journal. I still can't believe you called Michael, Lila muttered, not looking up from her screen. We need someone with media connections who can get this story out fast, Sophie replied, checking her phone for the 100th time. And Michael owes me a favor. He owes you more than a favor, Isabel said with interest. What exactly did you do for him? She wrote his senior thesis. Lila said helpfully, the one that got him hired at the Journal. I helped him research it, Sophie corrected. And right now, that connection might save Nathan's life. Michael stopped pacing and turned to face the room. Okay, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to publish a story accusing one of New York's most prominent families of fraud, embezzlement, and framing their own son based on evidence obtained through breaking and entering. When you put it like that, it sounds bad, Isabel said. It sounds insane, Michael countered. It sounds like career suicide. It sounds like the kind of story that gets you sued into oblivion by people who have more lawyers than I have brain cells. Sophie looked at Michael, seeing the conflict in his face. He wanted the story, it was huge, the kind that could make his career, but he was scared, and she understood that everyone in this room was risking something enormous. Michael, she said quietly, what if I can give you something even better than accusations? What if I can give you proof? She pulled out her phone and played the recording she'd made of William and Margaret's conversation as their voices filled the small apartment. Michael's expression changed, from skepticism to amazement, to the hungry look of a journalist who just stumbled onto the story of a lifetime. This is, he began, legally obtained evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Isabel finished. Plus, we have William's financial records showing the real embezzlement scheme, Lila added, and we have digital forensics proving that the evidence against Nathan was planted in his computer systems after the fact. Michael stared at them all. You realize what you're asking me to do? This isn't just exposing corporate fraud. This is taking down one of the most powerful families in New York. Part of that family, Sophie corrected, the part that's trying to destroy an innocent man, the part that's been stealing from their own company for years, Isabel added, the part that's willing to send people to prison to cover their tracks, Lila concluded. Michael was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks against the potential reward. Finally, he nodded. I'll need independent verification of everything, sources who can go on record, financial experts who can authenticate the documents. Done, Isabel said immediately. I can provide internal sources at Sterling Hotels who've suspected William for years, but were afraid to speak up. And I can connect you with forensic accountants who specialize in corporate fraud, Sophie added. Michael pulled out his own laptop. Okay, but we need to move fast. If the FBI arrests Nathan tomorrow, this becomes infinitely more complicated. About that, Isabel said, glancing at Sophie, Nathan should be here soon. Sophie's heart jumped. He's coming here? I convinced him to stop running and start fighting. You convinced him, or you ordered him? Lila asked with a grin. A little of both. Sophie felt a mixture of anticipation and terror. She hadn't seen Nathan since their devastating breakup. Hadn't heard his voice except in her dreams and nightmares. What if seeing him again made her lose her resolve? What if he was still convinced that leaving her was the best way to protect her? What if he'd decided he didn't love her anymore? The knock at her door came at exactly 4 o'clock a.m. Soft, but insistent. Sophie's heart hammered as she approached the door, checking the peephole to see Nathan standing in the hallway. He looked terrible, exhausted, unshaven, wearing clothes that had clearly been slept in. But when their eyes met through the small window, she saw something she hadn't expected. Determination. Sophie opened the door, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. All the words they needed to say, all the hurt and love and fear and hope, hung in the air between them. Hi, Nathan said finally. Hi, yourself. I hear you've been breaking into corporate offices and taking on the FBI. Someone had to. You were too busy hiding in a Queens motel. Nathan's smile was rueful. Touché. Behind Sophie, Isabel cleared her throat loudly. As touching as this reunion is, we have about 2 hours before the FBI expects to arrest Nathan. Can we focus on not letting that happen? Nathan stepped into the apartment, taking in the scene, computers everywhere, legal documents spread across every surface, the organized chaos of people working against impossible odds. Isabel filled me in on what you found, he said to Sophie. You risked everything to clear my name. I risked everything to find the truth, Sophie corrected. Clearing your name was just a side benefit. Sophie. Nathan's voice was soft, full of things he couldn't say in a room full of people. Later, she said firmly, right now, we have work to do. For the next hour, they worked with focused intensity. Michael crafted his article while Isabel provided insider information, and Lila handled the technical aspects of document verification. Nathan, meanwhile, contacted family allies who might be willing to support them when the story broke. I've got 3 board members who will go on record about their suspicions regarding William, Nathan reported. And my father's longtime assistant is willing to testify about Margaret's involvement in company financial decisions. That's good, Michael said, typing furiously. But I need more. I need someone who can speak to the family dynamics. Someone who can explain why Margaret would turn against her own son. Sophie and Nathan exchanged a look. They both knew who could provide that insight, but neither wanted to suggest it. Eleanor Whitmore, Isabel said quietly. She's known our family for 30 years, serves on multiple boards with Mother, and she genuinely likes Sophie. The woman from the charity dinner? Sophie asked. Would she really go against your mother publicly? Eleanor has her own sense of honor, Nathan said thoughtfully, and she despises corruption in any form. If we can prove to her what's really happening, I'll call her, Isabel said, reaching for her phone. Isabel, it's 4:30 the morning. Eleanor gets up at 5 o'clock to swim laps in her pool. She'll be awake. As Isabel made the call, Sophie found herself standing next to Nathan by the window, watching the sun begin to rise over Brooklyn. The proximity felt both natural and electric, like standing next to a live wire that could either light up her world or burn it down. Sophie, Nathan said quietly, after this is over, we need to talk. Do we? I owe you an apology. A massive, groveling, possibly humiliating apology. Sophie looked at him sideways. Possibly humiliating? I'm hoping you'll take pity on me before it gets to that point. Despite everything, Sophie found herself smiling. We'll see. Isabel hung up the phone with a triumphant expression. Eleanor is in. She's already suspected something was wrong with the family finances. And she's been wondering why Margaret was so determined to sabotage Nathan's relationship with you. She'll meet with Michael in 2 hours. Perfect, Michael said. I can have the story filed by noon. But there's one more thing we need to consider. What's that? Nathan asked. The FBI raid. Even if my story comes out today, they're still going to arrest you this morning based on the evidence they have. We need a way to delay that until the truth comes out. Sophie had been thinking about this problem all night. What if Nathan turns himself in? Everyone stared at her. That's your plan? Leela asked. Voluntary imprisonment? Think about it, Sophie continued. If Nathan walks into the FBI field office with his own lawyer, presents evidence of being framed, and demands a proper investigation, it changes the entire narrative. He's not a fugitive being arrested. He's a victim seeking justice. That's actually brilliant, Isabel said slowly. It forces them to listen to his side of the story, instead of just processing him through the system, and it gives Michael's story time to hit the newsstands, Nathan added, understanding dawning in his voice. By the time they could formally charge me, the truth would already be public. Michael nodded approvingly. It also makes for better headlines. Innocent man seeks justices plays a lot better than corporate heir arrested for fraud. Nathan looked around the room at the people who'd risked everything to save him. His sister, Sophie's best friend, Sophie's ex-boyfriend, and Sophie herself. People who barely knew him, but had believed in his innocence when his own family hadn't. Why? He asked quietly. Why did you all do this for me? Because you're my brother, and I love you, Isabel said simply. Because Sophie loves you, and I love Sophie, Lila added. Because it's a great story, and I want a Pulitzer, Michael said with a grin. Everyone turned to look at Sophie, waiting for her answer. She met Nathan's eyes, seeing the vulnerability there. The genuine confusion of someone who'd never experienced unconditional support. Because, she said softly, someone once told me that love means fighting for each other, not running away when things get difficult. Nathan's expression cracked, and Sophie saw him struggling with emotions he wasn't used to expressing publicly. Sophie, he began, his voice rough. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving you, for thinking I could protect you by abandoning you, for being a coward when you needed me to be brave. Nathan, let me finish, please. He took a step closer to her, and Sophie could see the tears threatening in his green eyes. You were right about everything. I spent my whole life giving up the things I loved because it was easier than fighting for them. I told myself it was noble, that I was protecting people. But really, I was just protecting myself from the possibility of failure. Sophie felt her own eyes filling with tears. Around them, the room had gone completely quiet. But you, Nathan continued, you fought for me even when I wouldn't fight for myself. You faced down the FBI, broke into corporate offices, took on my family, risked everything you'd worked for not because you had to, but because you believed I was worth saving. He reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. I love you, Sophie Carter. I love your courage, your integrity, your refusal to back down when you believe in something. I love the way you challenge me to be better, the way you see the man I could be, instead of just the man I am. Sophie's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. And if you'll let me, Nathan continued, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man who deserves your love, the man who fights for what matters, The man who chooses love over fear every single time. Sophie stared at him, seeing not the polished corporate prince she'd met in a coffee shop, but the real Nathan, vulnerable, hopeful, finally ready to fight for what he wanted. "That depends," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "On what? On whether you're going to call me sweetheart again." Nathan's laugh was watery, but genuine. "Never again, I promise." "Then yes," Sophie said, stepping into his arms. "Yes, to all of it." When Nathan kissed her, it felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at the same time. It tasted like second chances and new beginnings, and the kind of love that was strong enough to survive anything. "Okay," Isabel said loudly, after what felt like an appropriate amount of time. "This is very sweet, and I'm thrilled that my brother finally grew a spine, but we still have to keep him out of prison, so maybe save the reunion makeout session for after we've taken down William and Mother." Sophie and Nathan broke apart, both of them smiling and slightly embarrassed. "Right," Nathan said, his arm still around Sophie's waist. "Let's go save the family business and destroy the people who tried to destroy us," Sophie added with a grin that was absolutely wicked. Nathan looked down at her with pure adoration. "Have I mentioned lately that you're terrifying, and I love it? You can mention it again later. Right now, we have a war to win." 6 hours later, FBI field office, Federal Plaza. Nathan walked into the FBI building, flanked by his lawyer, Michael Lee, and Sophie, feeling more confident than he had in weeks. Behind them, Isabel coordinated with a growing team of supporters, board members, family allies, financial experts, and journalists who were all working to expose the truth. The story had broken an hour earlier. Michael's article in the Wall Street Journal was already being picked up by major news outlets across the country. Sterling Hotels. Heir framed by family members in complex embezzlement scheme. The evidence was damning, the sources credible, and the public reaction swift and decisive. Special Agent Julia Torres, who'd been leading the investigation, met them in the lobby. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Nathan could see the frustration in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she said formally, "we appreciate you coming in voluntarily." "Agent Torres," Nathan's lawyer replied, "my client is here to provide information about the real perpetrators of the crimes you've been investigating. We're aware of the news reports that came out this morning," Agent Torres said carefully. "We're reviewing the new evidence, but I'm sure you understand that we can't simply drop an investigation based on newspaper articles." "Of course not," Sophie said, stepping forward with a briefcase full of documents. "That's why we brought you the original financial records, digital forensics reports, and recorded confessions." Agent Torres's eyebrows rose. "Recorded confessions?" William Prescott and Margaret Sterling, discussing their plan to frame Nathan, their timeline for his arrest, and their motivations for destroying his relationship with Sophie, Nathan said calmly, "all recorded legally by witnesses who were present during the conversation." "And where exactly did this conversation take place?" "Sterling Hotel's headquarters," Isabel said, joining the group, "in William's office, which I gave Miss Carter permission to access as a member of the Sterling family and a company shareholder." Agent Torres looked between them all, clearly calculating the implications. "I'll need to review everything with my team." "Of course," Nathan said. "In the meantime, I'd like to provide a full statement about my knowledge of the financial irregularities at Sterling Hotels and my suspicions about who was really responsible." Over the next 3 hours, Nathan laid out everything he knew about William's gradual takeover of company financial operations, his manipulation of family politics, and his systematic embezzlement of company funds. Sophie and Isabel provided supporting evidence while Michael documented everything for his follow-up articles. By the time they emerged from the FBI building, the story had exploded across social media and financial news networks. William Prescott had been arrested at his Hamptons house. Margaret Sterling was being questioned by federal agents, and the board of directors had called an emergency meeting to address the crisis. "So, what happens now?" Sophie asked as they stood on the steps of the federal building, surrounded by reporters and photographers. "Now," Nathan said, taking her hand in front of all the cameras, "we go home and plan our future. What about Sterling Hotels? The company will survive stronger than the people who tried to destroy it." Nathan looked down at her with a smile that was pure joy, just like we are. Sophie stood on her tiptoes and kissed him right there in front of the FBI building and half the media in New York. It was the kind of kiss that made headlines, the kind that symbolized love conquering all, the kind that made people believe in happy endings. When they finally broke apart, Sophie grinned up at him. "So, what do we do for our second date?" Nathan laughed, the sound rich and free and full of possibilities. Whatever we want, we've got the rest of our lives to figure it out. 6 months later, Sophie stood in the penthouse office that Nathan had insisted on buying for her expanded marketing firm, looking out at the Manhattan skyline and marveling at how much her life had changed. Carter and Associates now occupied 3 floors of a midtown building, employed 15 people, and had a client list that included several Fortune 500 companies. More importantly, she'd kept her soul in the process. Her company specialized in helping small businesses compete with larger corporations, and she made sure that for every high-paying corporate client, they took on 3 smaller businesses at reduced rates. Knock, knock. Nathan's voice came from the doorway. Is the CEO of Manhattan's fastest-growing marketing firm available for lunch? Sophie turned around, her heart still skipping at the sight of him. Nathan had taken over as CEO of Sterling Hotels after his father's retirement, and the change in him was remarkable. He was confident without being arrogant, decisive without being ruthless, and he'd implemented changes that made the company more ethical and employee-focused than it had ever been. That depends, Sophie said, walking over to kiss him. Hello, is the CEO of one of America's most respected hotel chains buying? Always, Nathan said, pulling her close. How's your day been? Crazy. Good crazy, but crazy. Lila's handling the Johnson account presentation. Michael called about his book deal, and Isabel wants to know if we're free for dinner tomorrow night. What's Isabel up to now? She's launching her new nonprofit for financial literacy education. Apparently, our little corporate takedown inspired her to help other people recognize and fight financial fraud. Nathan grinned. My sister, the social justice warrior, who would have thought? Everyone except you, apparently. They had lunch at a small cafe in Brooklyn, Sophie's choice, because she insisted they stay connected to the real world outside their increasingly successful professional lives. As they walked back to the subway, Nathan stopped suddenly. Sophie, can I ask you something? Always. Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small blue box that made Sophie's heart stop completely. 6 months ago, you slapped me in a coffee shop for being an arrogant jerk. That's not a question, Sophie said weakly, staring at the box. You challenged me to be better, braver, more honest. You fought for me when I was too scared to fight for myself. You saved my life, my family's company, and my relationship with my sister. Nathan dropped to one knee right there on the sidewalk in Brooklyn as pedestrians walked around them. Street vendors hawked their wares, and the city continued its chaotic dance around them. Sophie Carter, you make me want to be the man I never thought I could be. You make me believe in love that's stronger than fear, partnership that's stronger than pride, and a future that's brighter than anything I ever imagined. Sophie was crying now, not caring that people were stopping to watch, that someone was probably taking pictures, that this moment would probably end up in tomorrow's society pages. Will you marry me? Nathan asked, opening the box to reveal the most beautiful ring Sophie had ever seen. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the woman who saw through all my defenses and loved me anyway? Sophie looked down at the man who'd gone from her biggest mistake to her greatest love, who'd learned to fight for what mattered, who'd chosen her over everything his family had planned for him. Yes, she said, pulling him to his feet and kissing him as the small crowd that had gathered burst into applause. Yes, to all of it. But I have one condition. Anything. The next time you call me sweetheart in that condescending tone, I'm allowed to slap you again. Nathan's laugh was brilliant and joyous, and full of promise. Deal. But just so we're clear, I'm never giving you a reason to slap me again. We'll see about that, Sterling. Is that a threat? Future Mrs.? Sterling, it's a promise. As they kissed again, surrounded by the chaos and energy of the city they both loved, Sophie couldn't help but think that sometimes the best love stories started with a slap and ended with forever, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, the man who annoyed you most in a coffee shop turned out to be the man you wanted to spend your life annoying right back. That, she thought, as Nathan spun her around while tourists took pictures and Isabel called to congratulate them and Lila demanded details, was exactly the kind of ridiculous, improbable, absolutely perfect love story she never would have believed in until it became her own. The end,